Hey everyone, we're back again with another movie review, and today we're talking Ready Player One.
Yeah, the Ready Player One is, I'm coming from this one as a fan of the book. I've read the book twice. I also listened to the audiobook, The Dulcet Tones of Will Wheaton, whereas Noelle has never read the book before. So we'll be discussing it from those two perspectives, and obviously we'll be avoiding spoilers as per usual.
Because Tracy's more of the expert on this book than I am, I came into it cold. Tracy will provide just a brief synopsis about what Ready Player One is about.
Yeah, so basically Ready Player One, the movie, is directed by Steven Spielberg. It's a science fiction action adventure based on the Ernest Cline novel of the same name. So the movie is set in 2045, where the world has basically fallen apart and people are living in mostly abject poverty. Then along comes James Halliday, who invents this virtual reality world called the Oasis. Now, most people spend almost all of their time in the Oasis. It operates on its own rules, it has its own currency, and that sort of thing. So our hero in the movie is an unassuming high school boy named Wade Watts. He is your typical overweight, sort of nerdy guy, I suppose. He thinks of himself as a self-styled Halliday expert, because when Halliday passed away, he set up an Easter egg hunt so that people could find these clues, follow this Easter egg hunt, and at the end of all of this, they will own and control the entirety of the Oasis. So going up against Wade and his friends in the Oasis, Artemis and H, is the shadowy figure of Interactive Online Industries, or IRI for short. So they're obviously the man, and they are looking to take control of the Oasis so that they can run it the way that they want. And basically the movie kicks off with Wade and his friends in search of the first clue of the Easter egg hunt.
Okay, now, like, having read the book, how did your overall enjoyment, what was this film like for you?
Well, it's very difficult for me to put into words. I think we'll go into it a lot more later, but basically there was a lot of good in the book and a lot of bad in the book, and there was a lot of good in this movie and a lot of bad in this movie. Any of you who have read Ernest Cline's Ready Player One will know that it, in some instances, is quite cringeworthy in the writing style. Ernest Cline's writing style is also a little bit overly verbose, and the movie is a little bit different in that. Obviously, they took an enormous book and they put it into a teeny tiny movie, so they also obviously left out a lot, but it's what they left out and what they included that's important, so we'll go into that. But as you have no experience whatsoever with the media, going into this as basically a newcomer, what did you think?
Yeah, for me, I had a definite sense of awe from the movie, and it was fun, but it was all, in that regard, you had to keep viewing it on a superficial level. Like, if you were looking for depth or any great, like, social commentary, there was nothing like that there. And it was definitely, I felt like it referenced both explicitly in the movie and then sort of tonally, and there was a lot of stuff sort of in the filmmaking itself that referenced a lot of 80s movies that we both sort of that generation, so we grew up watching movies like Tron and Flight of the Navigator and Goonies and all those, like, John Hughes movies, all that kind of stuff, and Ready Player One sort of maintains that sense. But at the same time, I mean, we think fondly of those movies now with, like, a sense of nostalgia, but for the most part a lot of them had flaws. And so Ready Player One also repeats many of those flaws, and so I found myself wondering, was that deliberate? Was that, like, in paying tribute to these older movies, or was it a failing on the part of Steven Spielberg and the writers and the filmmakers? So there was always that kind of thing happening for me, but at the same time, as a fluffy, light piece of cinema entertainment, it was super fun and like visually stunning. It was gorgeous. So I did find myself sort of torn between those two things. So I think, let's talk first about like the pros, really.
Yeah. Well, what we liked about it, I think for me straight off the bat, was Steven Spielberg's vision of what it's like in the Oasis. It's an incredibly huge online world that's so unreal, but it's so realistic at the same time. What I mean by unreal and realistic is that's really what a virtual reality world would look like. People don't look human. There's no uncanny valley. People really do look however they want to look, and the mocap and the special effects were mind-blowing. It was really, really, they had that part of it down pat.
Yeah, I think if you've watched movies like The Polar Express or Beowulf, like you'll remember that the mocap, the motion capture in that was kind of, it sort of hinted at Uncanny Valley. It made you a little like feel strange. Whereas here, I think they've kind of, it's the pinnacle of it. Like I felt watching it like I did watching James Cameron's Avatar, like for the first time. It was just like when you're in the Oasis, it's absolutely stunning, and visually it's a complete treat. So definitely, that was my number one reason to see Ready Player One is the special effects.
And I know that you also mentioned, and I think a lot of people will agree, Steven Spielberg's filmmaking has been quite hit and miss over the past couple of years, and I think for him Ready Player One is a hit, and not just when it comes to the special effects. It's what I really found in the film was that he trusts his audience. So like we mentioned earlier, Ready Player One is all about the 80s throwbacks. It's Ernest Cline's love letter to the 80s and that sense of nostalgia. But where he is overly verbose and explaining everything, Steven Spielberg lets the visuals speak for themselves. Now, I know that is the difference between a written media and a visual one, but Spielberg could have included a lot of voiceovers, and honestly, thank goodness he didn't. There's no neon flashing sign that says, hey, look, it's the DeLorean from Back to the Future. It's just the DeLorean, and it's just there.
No over-explanation.
Which I felt really had a hand in keeping the momentum of the movie going, and the pace was quite good. At least inside the Oasis, the pace keeps up, and it goes very, not too quickly, but I think it keeps that action-adventure sense going. So I know that there's a favorite scene that you would love to talk about.
I'm not going to go into any details what it's about, and I hear that it's actually not even in the book, but there's a big chunk that references The Shining, which is one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror movies of all time, flaws aside. And so it's just so intricately done. Like the detail, and like your jaws like on the floor just trying to realize how they brought this to life. And I think that was one of the few times that the movie really punched my nostalgia buttons. I mean, it's doing that a lot, like all the time, and it's got a lot of contemporary for us pop culture references like Overwatch characters and Halo figures and various other things. But that, for me, watch out for the Shining sequence if you haven't seen it, because that was my highlight of the movie for me, really.
Yeah, and I think another highlight of the film for both of us was Ben Mendelsohn's character. He plays Nolan Sorrento, who is the leader of IOI, Interactive Online Industries, and he is a great film villain. I think shame for Mendelsohn, he's been typecast now after Rogue One, but he plays that sort of 80s high school principal of a villain perfectly.
So he's menacing, but at the same time he's a bit of a wimp. He's a bit like, he bumbles around a bit. He actually relies on far more competent underlings to really get the job done. But he has a very much like a suited, like wimpy vibe like that's happening, except when he's in the Oasis he basically uses like a very dark Superman as his avatar, which was kind of interesting, or I interpreted his avatar as that. But yeah, he was also I don't think the movie would have worked as well if they hadn't had a villain and treated him on sort of that very fine line between menacing and kind of like funny at the same time.
Yeah, like pathetically funny.
Yeah, yeah.
And it also speaks a lot about the sort of world that we live in nowadays when it comes to EA and Battlefront 2 and the drama about microtransactions, because that's sort of what I want to do with the Oasis. They just want to pump it for all of the cash that they can get out of it, and that sort of motivation from a villain is very, I think, something that a lot of people can relate to. So you know the direction, the bad direction that's going to head in.
So that was again one of the, like, I felt one of the few times the movie was sort of making a comment that was on point. Like, you could actually see that happening now with trying to literally like commercialize everything, like the end of net neutrality. It's like, it's that kind of atmosphere that it's targeting, and I thought that it made those comments like really, really well, and I chuckled at those in a sort of a dark humor kind of way. But yeah, I mean, when I'm saying that now, it's like that was one of the few times that I felt that it was like delving into something and trying to say something a bit sort of deeper. I again, as I've already said, I found the film quite, like, coming into it fresh, not knowing the source material, so you can correct me in a second, but it was very superficial and lightweight. Now, as people who watch a hell of a lot of Black Mirror now, we've seen like the dark side of technology, and I was really expecting to see a lot more of that. I was expecting to see maybe, I mean, I know it's more of a kids or a family film at its core, but would there be, what is it like for adults using the Oasis? Like, is there any kind of sector that's full of like sex and violence, you know, where people are getting their kicks by living vicariously in horrible GTA kind of ways? Like, why is 80s creation so crucial in this world? Or up to 2018, like, why has nobody made anything new since then? Like, the entire Oasis and people's cultural frame of references is like 20, 30 years out of date.
Yeah, and I think that therein is obviously a big issue, is they had to leave out a lot of things, but they left out a lot of important things. Things like Noel mentioned, where, yes, there is some darkness in the books. If you've read it, you know that there's a death that affects the entire team very deeply, and you also know that there's a lot of things that get explained. The whole education system on Ludus glossed over, the fact that there's PvP zones versus non-PvP zones doesn't even get a look in. So going into it blind, you're actually going to feel quite confused if you don't have at least a basic understanding from the book of how the Oasis works. And like you said, the Black Mirror generation, all we can think of is really the dark, seedy underbelly of what this technology could hold. From the book's perspective, there's a lot of 80s references, and it's mostly only 80s references, because that is where James Halliday, he was brought up in the 80s. He's obsessed with that 80s culture. There are some contemporary references in the book, but it is mostly focused on the 80s thing, because the Easter egg hunt also revolves around James Halliday and his interests. So for me, a lot of the time when they brought in those contemporary references, even though it was cool to, you know, oh wow, character from Mass Effect, oh wow, there's Lara Croft, it felt a little bit weird, and those sorts of characters felt a little bit lost. They should have stuck with the nostalgia side that they originally had and just run with that. They didn't have to try and make it this contemporary nostalgia at the same time, because I guarantee that movie's probably not going to age that well.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of done to really, for a younger generation who are less exposed to the 80s,
but
perhaps.
The younger generation aren't going to then get the 80s references. And therein lies that weirdness, that off balance that I felt, that the younger generation, yeah, they're not going to get the 80s references, yeah. They're not going to get all of the 80s references, whereas we were like Monty Python or something like that. But we, as contemporary adults, were like, okay, it's cool, there's Tracer from Overwatch, but is that going to hold up in 20 years? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it boils down to the film doesn't have any I suppose, longevity aspirations. Like, it's a product of the here and now, essentially, and it's appealing to a very certain demographic. But it's like, I felt that, like, another question that I kept wondering about is, like, you know, this is a big chance to sort of delve a little bit into the issue of identity. You know, in a virtual space, you can choose how you represent it. And I know that's been discussed in any kind of text around virtual worlds for a very long time. But again, what is Ready Player's One approach to it? It literally has a character going, oh, that hot girl you like, what if it's a dude living in their mom's basement? I mean,
a 300-pound dude named Chuck. Yeah, like that's the actual phrasing, and that's as deep as it delves in. Now, I know that movies don't have to have a social commentary on every little thing, but here they've honestly missed a fantastic opportunity to do that sort of social commentary.
Yeah, it also, I mean, it just, some things didn't quite ring true for me. It like the idea that suddenly the world's focus is now in the American Midwest, but when the reality is, and we see it around us, of a world that's quite globalized. But when you go in the Oasis, it doesn't seem very crowded, considering it's supposed to be like a global phenomenon. And so that sort of, it didn't, the globalization aspect of it, I didn't find in it. But I mean, I'm coming into it sort of not knowing the source material or how that is treated or erased or ignored. My overarching sense was I was like happily into this like action adventure, like search for the clues, mystery kind of thing, until they got for me to the third clue. And then I felt that the movie became very rushed, and for someone who was like outside the knowledge of the books, it didn't make a lot of sense from that point onwards. I was actually really struggling to keep up with why characters were going here and there, what is this thing, you know, that was a problem for me as someone who didn't know the source material.
Yeah, I have been accused of comparing it too much to the book, but especially in the third act, if you haven't read the book, there's a good chance you won't know what's going on and why all of a sudden this one specific thing seems so important where it has barely been mentioned in the run-up. Again, there were some odd choices for what they left out of the movie, what they chose to sacrifice, and I think that by the time the third act rolls around and the hunt for the third clue is on, they have to wrap it up in this big epic way, and they're not entirely sure how to do that. So these little tidbits start getting thrown at you, but not enough to actually keep you going with the story.
Yeah, I think also there was, especially as it got towards the end, like I began to feel a stronger sense that this wasn't a movie made for me. Like,
yes.
Look, geek culture and is like key to this movie, and there were some things that were put on a pedestal that I found a little bit sort of ick, but it's like the film itself is, and it's almost like difficult for us to talk about this because we know like knives will come out for us, but it's like as women, like there's a supremely cool female character, and a couple actually if you think about it, in the movie. And but at the end of the day, and there is like a slight nod to teamwork. Like it's impossible for Wade and his Parzival, his avatar equivalent, to accomplish his mission and his dream without his fellow team members. But at the end of the day, it's these team members who are like the ones who sort of take the higher ground. They're the ones who make the sacrifices so that Wade can achieve, you know. And it's this, here we go again, it's the rather unexceptional straight white male, and he comes out on top and he wins the girl, and he's a nice guy. He's like a genuinely good-hearted guy who wants to help his friends, and he does, like he helps Artemis as well earlier on, like when she could easily have like died in the game. But it is that kind of enabling that kind of vision again. It's a repeat of something we've seen a million times.
A million times since the 80s, and you wonder to yourself, was that a deliberate choice? Were they doing this throwback to that sort of wish fulfillment, win the game, get the girl, or is this really where we are now? I don't hate the movie because of that. I actually rather enjoyed it. We both did. And it's quite difficult for us to talk about because we know we're not the target audience, which is a pity because we are in that sort of geek culture, but we aren't the young male that has these sorts of win the game, get the girl fantasies, and so you do feel like you're a little bit left out in the cold, and you know that this movie is not for you. It's not really that inclusive, and for those that the movie is geared towards and is focused on, you'll enjoy it a heck of a lot more than we did. I'm sure that it's going to be one of the best movies probably this year, and that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. It's just not really something that was made for us, and it shows.
Yeah, I feel like we're the supporting characters in the movie, so like that's our role, and we can either rebel against it or we can be happy that we're even there, or like whatever. But the point of the thing for me is like there was a lot of cliche in it. Where it does a lot of visual dazzle, and that's amazing, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, I don't think the film has a lot of heart. It's like, yay, this is super cool, it looks amazing.
It's very paint by numbers.
And it's really designed to get people of the specific group that they go. I think, and I would probably say that it's very much targeting sort of an older generation of geeks and fanboys, without using that word in a bad way. Or younger, like adolescent boys as well. I could imagine will sit there with their mouths open, like, this is incredible, to like imagine living in this world, like the wish fulfillment that the movie is filling. But at the same time, I don't think it has any aspirations behind that, which is kind of like they are, the filmmakers themselves are kind of IOI. It's like, let's just see what money we can make from giving people what they want, and sort of squeezing a bit of money out of them, which is maybe the most cynical thing that the movie about the movie.
But that is actually an excellent point. As I've mentioned so many times, so much was cut from the book. A lot of the final messages and the overarching lessons that you're supposed to learn were also dropped, and the fact that this does feel like a movie produced by IOI, you've really hit the nail on the head there. I never thought of it like that before. And it's
very strange that it's coming from Steven Spielberg when he was a master. You look at movies like E.T., which are all about the heart. Like an adolescent adventure, that it didn't matter who the audience was, like you really became like immersed in this world. So in that regard, I think Ready Player One is a bit of a failure. But I think if you were to score it, like what would you give it?
Well, it's a 6.5 for me, which I know might sound high considering how much I've complained about it. But when I walked out of the cinema, I had a lot to chew over, and obviously I spent a lot of time just mentally weighing up the differences I found between the book and the movie. But the visuals for me, that really won me over in the end, as well as some very specific scenes, especially the Shining, the Stanley Kubrick tribute was incredible. And at the end of the day, I have really good memories of the book, so I want to have good memories of the movie as well, which is where I think my 6.5 comes in.
Yeah, I'd actually also, I think, give it a 6.5, purely because there was a lot that I did enjoy, flaws aside, and in a certain respect, it captures that tone of those old movies that I used to enjoy so much. The idea of, the young kids coming out on top of like evil organization kind of thing, and that sort of gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling in its own lightweight way. So, and it was fun. It has its flaws. I think it was also a bit too long. But then it would probably be even more rushed, and more stuff would be missing from the book. But that was my overall feeling. So a 6.5 from the both of us. Not the worst movie, but not the second coming of geekdom, I don't think.
No, and I think that we can both basically summarize our feelings by saying that for better or worse, it emulates the source material, and for better or worse, it does take a lot of inspiration from the 80s. And how you feel about that is going to be based on your frame of reference, but this was ours.
Yeah. So again, we rambled on quite a bit for this one. So thank you for listening and watching, and we'll be back with some more reviews in the very near future.
At some point, we will actually watch Annihilation.
Yes, we have been asked to review Annihilation, so we promise that is coming as well.
But
so,
yeah, thank you for listening, and I'd love to hear once the movie is out, what are your thoughts on Ready Player One? And also, I want to know, if you've read the book, please tell me what you thought of it in comparison to the movie.
Yeah, how was it as an adaptation? Okay, and that we're going to call it a wrap right there. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time.
Okay, bye.